Goudge. I realize this is not the most interesting cover to look at. When you buy books used online, this is one of the perils. and I just had to guess whether I thought it would come with a slipcover. It did not, but I got this book, which is very elusive, and so overall, I'm happy that I have this. One visual that I will give you, though, it does have a little section in the middle with some pictures, and I just love getting to see a picture of Elizabeth Goudge as an older woman. I just think she was such a beautiful, beautiful lady. And I didn't want to even, speak about this book on my channel before I read it. It was part of my secret TBR, and I just was worried that speaking it into existence, that I was reading it on my channel would then make the reading less enjoyable. And I love this book. I really, really did love it. And when you read this, if you've read some of her fiction, you read this and you say, oh, this all makes sense. The atmosphere and the sense of borderline magic in the everyday and the deep, deep spirituality that is there just it shows so much in this. She was the daughter of a professor, and he transferred between different colleges and universities over the course of her childhood. So she kind of viewed her life. She very much puts into her books a sense of place. The sense of place it's just inundates her books. And so it makes sense then that her life she divides up based on where she lived and the different eras that it had. Her mother was chronically ill. So as a chronically ill person myself, I was really paying attention heavily to those passages. And it was sort of just a different variety of things that happened to her mother. When she was a young woman, she was hit very fast by a bicycle. And that was kind of the beginning of poor health for her, kind of morbidity. But then also she had very, very intense sinus pain and had a couple surgeries to try to fix that. Also, though, it did seem to be her morale was better when she was in wide open spaces, just with beautiful surroundings. And so it was really hard to read some of these chapters, kind of knowing that she wasn't going to be feeling as well, depending on the place that they were living in. And it opens up in Wells. Wells was where they lived, and I just love this first page. It says, have you seen, felt, smelt, tasted the beauty of this world? If your life has been lived in such pleasant places that you can answer yes, then you are one of the lucky ones. I am one of the fortunate, for I have never lived in a place that was not beautiful. And if at the end of my life I appreciate roses more than snow, that was not the case at the beginning. Then, in company with all children and most dogs, I thought snow the wonder of the world. The snow light filling the house with magic as the white flakes drifted down in windless silence. The splendor when the sun came out, and hills and fields and trees sparkled under the arc of blue sky. The thought of the things one did in the snow, tobogganing and snowballing and building a snowman, it was all ecstasy. And somewhere tucked away at the back of one's mind was the knowledge that every crystal in the vast whiteness, though too small for the human eye to see, was fashioned like a flower or a star. How could snow not be the wonder of the world? So imagine reading an entire book where there's passages like that sprinkled throughout. And I really liked that. I felt motivated to continue reading the whole time that I was reading this. And just so many profound observations in here. She says, it was my first depressing realization that an act of true self-sacrifice is not intended by God to leave you just as comfortable and well off as you were before. I thought that was so profound that sometimes when we think we want to be giving, myself included, we want to have, the joy of the giving, but we don't want to have the sorrow of giving away, whatever thing we were offering. And I thought that was so beautiful. So she was born in Wells, and her mother's health was not that good. And then eventually they had the opportunity to move to Ely. And that is where some of her fondest memories are. She loved her time in Ely, and she just loved being on the campus of the university. I can't remember specifically like what college her father was involved in, but it was just so lovely to read about her delight in that. And you should look up the Ely Cathedral, is so stunning, and I would love to visit it someday. And then kind of this experiential Christianity. I love these passages that she has talking about experiencing beauty and knowing, really being convicted that God created beauty. And so it just being this really beautiful thing. She says, a little later, I was alone in the garden at a spot where hyacinths and deep red wallflowers were in bloom against a gray stone wall, and God revealed himself in a shining world. Every flower flamed with a glory and every bird sang of it. It would be foolish to try and describe the experience. Who can? Only the poets and mystics can capture something of the light. And so then she quotes a little bit of Wordsworth, which was the inspiration for me getting the Prelude by Wordsworth. And then she quotes some Laurie Lee. And she says about Laurie Lee, he felt fear as well as awe, and he was right. In our weakness, it can seem a terrible as well as a beautiful world. But I do not remember fear, only awed amazement. I picked some of the deep red wallflowers and a small hyacinth, and Nanny let me keep them in a pot of water beside my bed in the night nursery. The scent of wallflowers and hyacinths is now for me irretrievably mixed up with the reading of the Gospels. My godmother had given me a little copy of the New Testament, and in the ungrateful way of spoilt children, I had not bothered with it and had lost it. But now I don't remember how. It came to light again and lived under my pillow. I woke up with the birds and read it every morning, not ceasing to read it until I had reached the end of the fourth Gospel. I cannot have understood much of what I read, but all through that reading time I continued in the amazement of peace and love. And that experience has been described over and over again. He looked us through the lattice of our fresh, and he spoke us fair. Then the whole heavenly thing slipped away, never to return. So she does talk about kind of the ebbs and flows that her faith had, which I think is very encouraging for any person of faith, that you don't have to feel guilt, when you do go through those. You have those peaks, which are wonderful, but you also go through the valleys, and she just puts it really, really beautifully. And she also talks about just the toll it took on her mother's mental health of just these years and years of being unwell. And that is something that I'm so thankful for books like Wintering and This Beautiful Truth, because they've really encouraged me to partake in self-care. When I go through day in, day out of feeling unwell, and it just depends on, it's just different levels of unwell depending on the day. And so self-care has been so wonderful. All the books and baths and hot cocoa. I've been having so much hot cocoa this winter and watching beautiful shows, and it's just delightful to really savor those things. So then another passage on faith that I really liked. It says, children lucky enough to grow up in a Christian home are given a good start, since small children are copycats and believe what their parents believe and do as their parents do. And later, they sail out from a harbor that has a lighthouse on the rocks, and however far they travel, it is difficult to forget the harbor with the green fields of childhood behind it, and the light always haunts them. It is a finger of light feeling for them. But neither a copycat religion nor a haunting is faith. Somewhere, if one is lucky enough to have faith, however wobbly and constantly tested it may be, there must have been a moment of conviction that fell like a seed to the earth and struck root. When my grandfather said that all that he knew was going into nothingness, I felt at first furious, then incredulous. What he said was a lie. It was impossible. His knowledge was a closed book to me, but I knew what he was in himself. What sort of a man his chosen life of selfless love and struggle had made him. Among living creatures, man alone it appears, is capable of making this deliberate choice, and my grandfather was only one among a great multitude of selfless lovers and seekers. If all this love and struggle and knowledge was to go to waste, then not only must God be so crazy that he could not exist, but the universe also was crazy and pointless. Yet it did not seem to be. It seemed to bear witness to a marvelous providence and order. It seemed to bear witness to a God who is not crazy. This is what I worked out later. At the time, I simply knew the thing was impossible. And I think faith roots more easily in these sudden convictions, coming like blinks of light from the lighthouse, than by any muddled reasoning of a thing as limited as the normal human mind. And then she also talks about, though there was a season when she lived in Ely and her mom's health was the best, and how that was such a sweet, sweet time for their family. And tragically, it did not last for long because her father was offered a very, very big promotion to move to Oxford. And her mother just was very selfless about it and gave her father the go-ahead to move to Oxford. And then she does talk about her parents passing away and the deep, deep grief she went through from that. And then a section towards the end that I thought was so moving was where she ended up just having this companion that lived with her, and they became very, very good friends. She was just going to come stay for the winter after Elizabeth Goudge's mother had passed away, and then she just stayed forever. And they ended up moving. She and her mother lived for a few years after her father died in Devon. And then she moved. Now I can't remember where she moved with her friend. Well, anyhow, it is beside the point. The only thing that did knock this down, instead of being 5 stars, it knocked it down to 4 stars, was there was some, it was like she had this penchant for kind of the fascination with the supernatural, to which, to a degree that it made me uncomfortable. And normally I wouldn't hold that against a book, but since it is a Christian biography, that was an element that left me kind of uncomfortable. And then some of the theological leanings, I feel like she was kind of bordering on not being orthodox. And so those parts I didn't like those parts, basically. But the rest of the book I really did enjoy. And then I'll leave you with one last quote in this chapter that is named Pain and the Love of God. And she says, "But the deepest mystery of all for me is this one. Suffering, we believe, stems from evil, and evil has no part in the will of God. Yet God allowed the cruelty, jealousy, and cowardice of man to put his son upon the cross, and when he was there, made no move to end his torture. God himself and man had to stick it out until the end. And so God and the suffering caused by sin are inseparably united, and will be so until sin ends. The mind boggles, but there is enormous comfort here. For one thing, it is hard to doubt the love of a God who is ready to suffer and die for us. For another thing, when we suffer, we must be as close to God as we are to the pain. At the worst of it, we may feel as Christ did, that God forsakes when unbearable pain takes over. But the truth must be the reverse. Devout people used to say of pain or grief, God touched me. Gerard Manley Hopkins says, and dost thou touch me afresh? Over again I feel thy finger and find thee. And that is so beautiful, and something that I think is really crucial when you're thinking about, how can God let really hard things happen to good people, And he let the hardest thing of all happen to his son. And I just love that quote, and I will be treasuring that quote and thinking about it and pondering it. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on the joy of the snow, and I will be back with another secret TBR video at some point. I'm working my way through the secret TBR. It's going pretty well. I'm still very excited about the books on that list. Thank you as always for watching, and I will be back with another video soon. Bye.